let's talk about ego death or ego dissolution. And I think it would be a perfect opportunity to tackle this topic while I'm in traffic, because when you're in traffic, you're working as an organism. Everyone is on the same team. It may not seem that way, but if everybody just cruises along at the right speed, nobody has to slam on their brakes. And in order to do this, it requires that people get passed by other people, or maybe don't get there just as fast as they think they're going to. But there's an agreed upon method to getting through traffic for most people. And this relates so much to ego because there's always the one guy who thinks he's more important than others. And he will zoom in and out, and you'll end up seeing him 10 miles up the road in the same position he started in. The interesting thing about this is that, and I'm going to get over into the fast lane, even though it's not really a fast lane right now. The reason I bring up traffic is because you see ego in traffic a lot. The person who's honking at you, the entitled person who thinks that they should get there faster, so therefore everybody should get out of their way. The one who waits till the last minute to get in, or forbid the guy who stops in the middle of a 65-mile-an-hour freeway in order to just literally stop in the middle of the freeway and put his turn signal on to get over into a line of traffic of people who have been waiting for a half an hour. Not just because of an accident or, oops, I missed my exit, but I am more important, therefore I'm going to go into the very end and inconvenience an entire lane of traffic. And it's funny because I feel like when you're out driving, you really see it much more clearly than you see. Well, you can see it on the internet pretty damn clearly, but generally in the workplace or having discussions with people in general, most people hold back on really pushing themselves as overly important. Most people can step back from that ego cliff and say, oh, well, I'm just a person, and be humble. Like when you're in there for a job interview, or when you're, talking to a server or a customer, which, every once in a while I run into one of those entitled people who treats everybody else like shit, who really thinks that they are more important. And it's got to be a very painful way to live, because the long-term repercussions of acting like you're more important than other people, they can only haunt you. Back to ego death here. What is ego death? There's no such thing. Ego is part of us. If you want to get into the Freudian terminology, and I really avoid that, philosophical terminology or religious terminology, anybody who follows my channel knows that I really avoid using terms like Satori, or speaking of, in psychology, the id, the ego, and the superego, Freudian. These are things I've studied, concepts I've studied, but that fall completely flat of explaining anything very important to the average person. My whole goal here in discussing the things I talk about on my channel has been to keep them in layman terms, not because I think my audience is stupid. On the contrary, I think my audience is fucking smart. Otherwise, they wouldn't be listening to me. But because I'm so genius, I know everything. It's tremendous. Everybody's talking about it. I'm just totally kidding. The ego rides through. When I was in my 20s, I thought I knew a hell of a lot. Now I'm almost 50, and I realize how little I actually know about the real world and how ignorant I am. I mean, over the last 10 years, I probably feel half as confident as I did 10 years ago in knowing the things that I know to be true, to be actually true. And I'm not just talking about religion or science or politics, but just everything in general. That, especially when it relates to us and how we can change, drop of a hat, we can change our opinions if we're open-minded enough to know what's going on and to actually pay attention. Now, the ego gets in the way when we don't want to admit that we made a mistake in the past. The example would be this term flip-flopper. People say, oh, this politician was a flip-flopper. They used to have this belief about drugs, and now all of a sudden they want this with drugs. It's like, well, when asked why, most people will say, because new information became available to me and I changed my opinion on it. For some reason, that's become unacceptable. Therefore, to keep the outer illusion of ego strong, people have to continue to back up claims that may not even be true anymore. Things that they once believed when they were younger. And like I said, the older I get, the more I realize how little I really knew. But I still have enough confidence to know that some of these basic truths shine through no matter what. And one of those was about ego death. Now look, when I was 17, 18, I had a very intense psychedelic experience that led me to buy a book called The Tibetan Book of the Dead. This was written by Timothy Leary and Ralph Metzner, and it was actually a book called The Psychedelic Experience, but it was based on the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And it compared Hindu scripture and these, what they call bardos, which are like layers of reality, layers of the universe. You would go into these different bardos, and they realized that they had these very close comparisons to what happened during a psychedelic experience. But one of these religious experiences that is universal is the stripping away of that superego, if you will. And this is where I think people get confused. The ego is not your enemy. People say, oh, you need to get rid of your ego. Get rid of your ego is who you are. It's not the ego itself that's the problem. It is the superego. And some people may even say what they call the id, which is the primal ego, that, you know. But that's, you can't even get rid of that. There's something within our id that allows us to primally, instinctually recognize when something is bullshit and to call it out. When we get angry, when we get frustrated, or when these primal feelings come out, what you might call the reptile brain, if you will, these aren't things we need to abandon. These are things that there's a reason why we've hung on to them for so long, because they benefit us as long as we learn to control them, you see. Think of it like a pet. You can have a pet dog, you can have a pet alligator. As long as you train this animal to, you know, properly suit the environment that it's growing up in and to not bite its owner, then you can, well, I don't know what you get out of an alligator. You can ride an alligator, I guess, but animals, I guess I compare that to our kind of primal ego in the sense that, yeah, if it's well trained, it'll serve us well. But when it comes to this, the ego itself, the who am I, this isn't something we want to get rid of. We don't want to lose who we are. We don't want to abandon being a human being. And so what we're really trying to do is get rid of this bullshit ego. So think about it this way. When you walk into a room, meeting new people, you might put on a front. I know most people will say, oh, I'm the same person, but no, you're not. We act a little differently when we're in crowds of people that we don't know. Whether it's insecurity or over-security, overcompensation. And so imagine the difference between being in a crowd of new people you've never met that you're trying to impress, or that maybe you need a job, whatever it might be, a job fair or something. And then compare that to the true you that you know when you're sitting at home in your bedroom. Now take that true you when you're in your bedroom and compare it to the real you that you don't even see, even when you're in your quietest moments. That is the removal of the ego. That is ego death. It's getting rid of the parts of ourselves that say, I want to be seen a certain way by others. Now, this isn't the same as being seen a certain way by ourselves. It's a very important distinction. When we know we have to improve ourselves, improve our attitudes, improve our, financial situation, whatever it might be, we find ourselves trying to improve upon our lives. And this is much different than worrying about what other people think about us and our financial situation, or what other people feel about us as humans. It's not as important. But other people do give us an idea of who we are by kind of shining the mirror on us. If one friend or one acquaintance says that we're really a mean person, and we know we're not, it's not going to go very far. It's not going to really affect most people. But if you're if you have 10 friends and everybody you meet telling you that you're an asshole, then then yes, society does reflect a little bit about us, and that is important to pay attention to. So, but overall, we know deep down inside who we really are, to an extent. And when you strip away this ego, the real ego, it's amazing what you find underneath. It doesn't mean you're not a person anymore. It doesn't mean you're not human. In fact, it means you're almost superhuman. Anybody who's ever been in a mental state where you've removed the burdens and the limitations of the frontal cortex, tunnel honk, gotta do it. And you remove these limitations that we have, that we put upon ourselves, but also that nature puts upon us for having to live. You have to get up, you have to go to work, you have to eat, you have all these basic mental, processes going at any one time. If you shut those down and you say through psychedelics, transcendental meditation, extreme yoga practices, religious ritual, chanting, sweat lodges, there are many different ways to obtain this. And all of them bring us closer to who we are and truly understanding ourselves. And it's really an amazing experience when you've eliminated this burden of the overburden of self, I guess. The self that's not truly self, the self that's not really us. So it'd be the illusion, the egotistical illusion of who we are. Well, anyway, this has been a long enough chat. Now I'm in traffic and I need to focus, so I've been in traffic the whole time, but it got light for a while and I had a pretty good day, pretty good luck. So I will talk to you all next time, and just remember, it's not about abandoning your ego. It's not about forgetting who you are or eliminating parts of yourself. It's about improving the parts of ourselves that we know will make us better people. And only we know this deep down inside, and we can fool ourselves, we can lie to ourselves, we can lie to other people, but you know who you are. We all know who we are. Peace out, my friends.